Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We've seen an unprecedented exchange as far as the Parliament is concerned. We've seen what's happening as far as the Supreme Court is concerned. The decision today as far as the funds of the elections are concerned. Also, we'll be talking about the ramifications of this decision, along with the fact, of course, that as far as parliamentary supremacy is concerned, as far as infringing on powers of the executive is concerned, the government has a clear stance. As far as the issue of the Supreme Court forging into these issues, as far as the government is concerned, we'll be talking about the ramifications of this kind of development for the whole political process, also for the ramifications of democracy at this time, for parliamentary supremacy overall, as far as also the concept of separation of powers and how and where we're seeing at this time an overlap. Are we really seeing an overlap? It's certainly one of those cases where it's unprecedented for a lot of reasons. Firstly, of course, the resolutions that are coming from the Parliament regarding the infringement of power of the legislative house as far as the country is concerned. Also, the Supreme Court and the decisions that are coming from there, the preemptive injunction we saw on the earlier bill that has yet to become law, all of those things today on Perspective. I have with me Umer Gilani, who is a legal expert. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Zulfikar Ali Bader, who is spokesperson for Bilawal, Bhutto, Zardari. Thank you for being with us. Usama, Khawar, Ghumman, who is a constitutional lawyer. Thank you for being with us. And Irfan, ghouri, who is a senior journalist. Thank you for joining us today. Ji, Umer Gilani Saab, let's start off with you. It's certainly, I mean, as a lawyer, how do you look at what's happening between the Supreme Court and the Parliament? You know, we have a legislative house. Of course, you know, we have always thought that there is a clear separation of powers. How are you? Is that just bookish? Is that, you know, is it how important is it for the concept of parliamentary supremacy at this time? And the way that the Parliament is legislating, the way that it is then being acted upon or against by the Supreme Court, and also the resolutions that are coming from the Parliament.
So I think my view might be a little unconventional on this particular question, but I think what is happening between the Parliament and the Supreme Court is in some ways healthy. It is healthy for our democracy.
I think that is unconventional.
Because for many years, at least since 2008, there has been a continuous and perpetual onslaught on the powers of the Parliament by one of the organs of the state, that is the judiciary. And I don't take any delight or pride in saying this out as a member of the bar myself, as an officer of the court. But I do feel that there is no question that the judicial branch of the state has over the years encroached upon powers which are both legislative and executive in nature. You know, you don't have to look very far. It was just a few years ago that the Honorable Supreme Court of Pakistan was presiding over the construction of a crowd-funded dam in the exercise of what it called the jurisdiction to enforce the fundamental rights of the people of Pakistan. So you use the fundamental rights jurisdiction to build a dam. Go a little farther back, and in the year 2000, when the elected representatives of the people in Parliament and the government was overthrown by a military dictator, the Supreme Court of Pakistan legitimized that overthrow and gave the dictator a 3-year license to amend the constitution, once again in Article 184(3), the fundamental rights jurisdiction. So when one of the branches of the state is continually launching an onslaught on the other, there has to be a time when the other kicks back and says, okay, let's have, we want to have our domain back. So what the Parliament has recently done is that it has exercised its right conferred upon it by Article 191 of the Constitution to legislate on issues of procedural law governing the Supreme Court of Pakistan. That's as simple as this.
Okay,
Article 199 gave the Parliament the authority to legislate on the issues relating to the practices and procedure of the Supreme Court, and it did so. That is a power that the Parliament has had since 1973 or before.
On that note,
now, the reason why I say it's healthy is because institutional balance in this country can only be restored if the institutions balance each other.
Right, fair enough. Let me come back to you. On that note, let me go to Zulfikar Ali Bader. Ji, Zulfikar Sahab, how is your party looking at this? You heard what Umer Gilani is saying. He's saying that perhaps it's time for the Parliament to kick back. But regardless of that, what happened today as far as the new the resolutions, of course, that were passed and the new bill that was introduced? What is your take? What does the government say now? What does the PPP say about it? As far as we've seen the reaction come from the Supreme Court on the last enactment. As far as the procedure bill is concerned, how are you looking at this now? That this bill that is being tabled, that was tabled today.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Mahrukh, for inviting me to your show. I would like to add value to what Umer Gilani Sahab was saying. I think it's a healthy perspective, and he have given a new thought to think about it. So the difference between the powers of legislature and the judiciary, it's there is a concept of known as separation of power, but there is also the system of check and balance is also there. So there is no doubt about it that Parliament is the supreme institution of Pakistan, and it is superior than all the institutions as they have the power to legislate and do the enactment, and they can amend the constitution once they have the 1/3 or 2/3 of the majority, and once they approve it, they can amend it, and with simple majority they can make or break any law other than the constitution amendments. So what I am trying to say, our party is very clear. Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari on the floor of the House few days back mentioned about one thing, that the 19th Amendment was passed when we were blackmailed and the Parliament and the government was weak at that time and judiciary was very strong. So after the passing of 18th Amendment, 19th Amendment were passed, and they all agreed to pass the amendment as the judiciary said that we are going to strike down the 18th Amendment. So in order to save the 18th Amendment, so they passed the 19th Amendment and they took over all the powers from Parliament to the Supreme Judicial Council. So this is one thing. So we respect the judges and the orders of the Supreme Court. There is no dispute over that. And another thing, which is, so when it comes to the interpretation of the Constitution, like especially on 63A, so one day there is one judgment on that, and on another scenario there is another judgment.
Let me come back to you. Let me just take Usama Saab's opinion.
I just want to complete that. So when there is a judicial dictatorship, and if any of the judges violates the constitution, then what is the remedy? This is what Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab have asked on the floor of the House. So this is the thought-provoking thing.
Judicial dictatorship, Zulfikar Sahab, those are very hard words. Those are very strong words. When you say judicial
dictatorship, well, you see, taking the suo moto is a judicial dictatorship, that you don't have to wait for the appellant court to decide.
But Zulfikar Sahab, those suo moto has existed for a long time. Let me come back to you and let me take your opinion on this. I'm going to go to Usama. Usama, you heard what Zulfikar Ali Bader Sahab is saying, what Umer Gilani Sahab was saying before that. Do you agree with this statement? I mean, of course, saying judicial dictatorship, and then the way that we've seen the preemptive injunction happen as far as the last piece of legislation that was legislated upon by the Parliament, with a majority. How are you looking at this, and the fact that, again, pursuant to that, we saw an order that was rather unconventional as far as asking for the funds to be transferred in the manner that it did today. and this means that do you see a constant struggle happening? How do you look at the next few weeks, so to speak?
Thank you, Mahrukh. Mahrukh, I wish I could be as hopeful as my brother Umer Gilani is. But what I see here is an implosion of of an institution, of a very important institution of the state, that is Supreme Court. And I would not have been worried about the executive and parliament's defiance, and also this internal struggle that is going within the institution, if we were in a country where rule of law was much more entrenched. uh, for example, in US, we saw that there was an attempt by proto-fascist President Trump to defy the courts, but ultimately the system prevailed. But here we have a very fragile sort of balance. In a sense, what the system is based, that there's one pillar of the state, which is the executive, which controls the coercive arm of the state. The other is the parliament, which has the purse, the power of the purse. The third pillar, Supreme Court, is in a unique sense that it does not neither have money nor it has coercive arm of the state at its disposal. For effective enforcement of its decisions, it is dependent upon both of those other arms of the state. So, in this sense, it's unfortunate that the Supreme Court has involved itself in really unfortunate sort of controversy in a political arena domain, which it was not proper for them. This entire struggle, this is essentially a political matter. It's a struggle between former prime minister, his party, the present government, and then the parts of establishment. Judiciary should have stayed away from it. Right now, what it has done is become part of this partisan battle, and as a result, the institution and the only loser is the Supreme Court, and also the people of Pakistan, because what the judiciary is doing in this partisan battle, it is employing tactics that are against the established constitutional norms, the jurisprudence developed over the period of time in common law across the world. It is very rare, Mahrukh. You have to understand that the Supreme Court, what it did yesterday was an unprecedented act, which was very similar to what happened in 97. So there was a rogue Chief Justice, Sajjad Ali Shah. So the Parliament, by two-third majority, adopted an amendment, which was 13th Amendment, which did away with Article 58(2)(b), which was the presidential power of dissolution of the Parliament. The Chief Justice and Supreme Court gave a restraining order against a constitutional amendment, and so that which was unprecedented. And Supreme Court, what it has done yesterday and today is very much similar to what was done in 97. And the end, that Chief Justice, his end was not very pleasant. It was not very good for the institution. And so in this sense today, so this battle might
true that there is, at this time, the lawyers are also very much divided? Isn't it true that at this time you have a political divide, like you said? So in that kind of an overall climate, whatever is happening can prove to be quite detrimental to the overall political process, to the parliamentary democracy that we want in this country to to soar, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely, I have absolutely no doubt about it, that the Supreme Court has worsened the crisis, exacerbated the crisis, and it has to this extent. I agree with Gilani Saab that Supreme Court has constantly encroached upon the powers of the executive and the Parliament, starting from 2009, since the lawyers' movement. So, in that sense, there's also a silver lining that the Parliament is uh, reclaiming the space it had lost. But I am not very comfortable in the political environment in which this space is being regained. So in that sense, it might, in the long run, it might turn out to be a course correction. But it appears that this parliamentary comeback is taking place in such a partisan and charged environment that it might not prove to be beneficial for the parliamentary democracy, for establishment of rule of law in this country.
Fair enough. Let me come back to you. Zulfikar, before I go to Zulfikar Sahab, Umar Sahab, overall, of course, as far as this whole process is concerned, one may say that, like you are saying, you're optimistic, it may go towards a better end. But at this time, the struggle that we are seeing, the kind of, back and forth exchange that we are looking at between the Parliament and the Supreme Court is certainly indicative of a divide, which is also then echoed by political parties. Also, if you look at the Supreme Court, we've seen the judges say again and again that the politicians invariably come to us. The recourse, the political questions should be diverted from the Supreme Court. So then who embroils the Supreme Court in all of this?
Who embroiled the Supreme Court in this particular battle? I think the answer is very simple. It is my Lord the Chief Justice, because he was cautioned by, when this matter started, there was a 9-member bench, and there were 2 members of the bench who at least put it down in writing that by entering into this dispute, we are playing with fire, and we don't know where this charged battle will lead. But I want to come back to the major question that you've asked, which is, what does this battle mean for our country? Now, as far as the executive versus judiciary conflict is concerned, that is a system, it's an inbuilt feature of our system, and when the judiciary has for more than a decade impeded on the parliament space, the parliament pushing back is only natural and healthy. What is not healthy, and here I agree with my learned brother Usama Khawar, is what is happening within the Supreme Court. You see, what is happening between Parliament versus judiciary, that's normal.
But judiciary
what is
versus
happening
judiciary also
within the Supreme Court itself is a cause of concern for every concerned citizen in this country. Because when the Supreme Court's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and some of the most eminent members, some of the most eminent jurists of this court, we are not talking here about 7 judges. We are talking about some of the most highly respected people of this country, such as Justice Athar Minallah, Justice Mandu Khail, Justice Yahya Afridi, Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, and Justice Qazi Faiz Isa. These are heavyweights. And when we see these people on the one side and these Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on the other, we are talking here about an implosion of the institution of the judiciary. And that is something which is not good for the Chief Justice's own legacy, it is not good for the dissenting judges, and it is not good for the future of this country.
Right. We have with us Shahza Khwaja, who is an M&A with PMLN. She's also the one who tabled the bill today as far as the Supreme Court Review of Judgments and Orders Bill 2023 is concerned. Shahza, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Shahza, what is this bill about, and why did the Parliament feel that they needed to legislate on this?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Mahrukh. So, the bill essentially is, as the name suggests, it is to strengthen the rules, the procedures of the court. The idea, the basic essence of the bill is that, Mahrukh, let's say if the Supreme Court, the Honorable Judges of the Supreme Court take a suo motu notice on any issue of public importance. They're taking the notice and then they give a decision. And once the decision is out there, there is no means of really, you can say go into an appeal. Even the review that happened before the same honorable judges who've given the initial verdict in the first place. So the idea is to strengthen the justice procedure, to expand the review jurisdiction of the court, in the sense that now, if and when the bill is, gazetted and enacted and becomes a law and act, if someone goes into the review, the procedure will be the same as the procedure laid out for an appeal. So we've essentially, equated the review procedure with that of an appeal, where when you go in an appeal, there will be a larger bench constituted that will review the initial decision, whether it's a suo motu or the original jurisdiction of the court. Secondly, you will then have the right to change your counsel. You can change your lawyer. And also, and there's a time stipulated within which you can, actually send your case for review. So the idea is to give the people of Pakistan, and this bill is for for all the cases that are heard under Article 184. So the idea is that all the cases that are heard for the larger public, benefit, the public at large should have that right to get meaningful justice if they feel, if they're an aggrieved party and they feel that the initial judgment needs to be reviewed.
Shahzad, there was a resolution in the Parliament today about usurping Parliament's power. Overall, we've had statements like, judicial activism and what has happened in the past. What is the stance as far as the Parliament is concerned on the decision that came out today on, which is rather unprecedented as far as the funds of the elections are concerned, and also, directions that were issued to the State Bank, and also the preemptive injunction that came out on the issue of the procedure bill that has yet to become law?
So, Mahrukh, you see the problem, all of this constitutional and political crisis starts when Article 63A is kind of interpreted in a way where we see that it has essentially been rewritten by the Honorable Court. The issue is that, and I would like to reiterate and go back to that point, where the Constitution says that once a member has voted on a vote of no confidence, it's one of the reasons on which a political party can actually defeat their members. So it says that once a member has voted against the directions of the party head, now party head was also, vague as to if it's the parliamentary party head or the party head, which was in that case the Chaudhry Shujat, while the parliamentary party head was Pervez Rai Saab. So, that was also vague, but since it was vague, not a lot of noise was created around it. But the problem was that it says that once a member has voted against the party direction, then you can de-seat them. Then you can, actually send a case to ECP, a reference against them. But if you are saying that their vote cannot be counted and yet they are disqualified, so you are punishing them without the crime being committed. And the second issue is that the problem with this is that let's suppose tomorrow, God forbid, a prime minister goes rogue. Now we have, or a chief minister goes rogue. Now we have no way of removing the prime minister constitutionally. That is why the vote of no confidence was there in place in the first place. Now the prime minister becomes the supreme authority once he becomes the prime minister, because no one from his own party or her own party can vote against him. So this is the crux where the Supreme Court's transgression into the parliamentary, realms, parliamentary duties, parliamentary responsibilities and rights began. And that started the crux of all of this political judicial, crisis that we see today. And now it has become a series of such transgressions, where the law, like you said, before being enacted, was shot down by the Honorable Supreme Court. And even though they've, said that there's a stay on it, it really, it really is unprecedented to do what is done. And that is why we are constantly saying that this group of judges, I just tell you a story. I was at an iftar when the day this bench was announced, and a few media persons and diplomats and parliamentarians, they're like, this is the bench. We know what the decision is going to look like. No point in going to the Supreme Court tomorrow. So if this is the perception that has been created around Supreme Court and a few judges, the justice does not only has to be done, but it also has to be seen to be done, right? And today, the way the Supreme Court has directed, an institution of the government to perform a certain function, I mean, all of this we feel is a transgression on the rights of the National Assembly, of the Parliament. Lawmaking is the jurisdiction. Money bills, how the National Exchequer, the money from National Exchequer is spent, is the sole prerogative of the National Assembly and the lower house of the Parliament. And it is very unfortunate the way, these things are being conducted.
Are you prepared? I mean, of course, we've seen the kind of reaction that's come from the procedures bill. Are you prepared for a reaction from the Supreme Court on this piece of legislation also, or do you think that it'll, just as your opinion, what is the Parliament's opinion? You think that it'll sail through?
I mean, we hope that it sails through. And right now, I think what we're doing is all of the legislation, if you give it a review, all of them are there to strengthen the role of the Supreme Court. They gave, jurisdiction to the larger bench. All our legislations are pushing for, collective wisdom of all the honorable judges of the Supreme Court. But it is unfortunate how on the other end, these legislations are being, targeted. And we do feel that there is a certain bias that we see amongst a certain few elements who we feel are also at large damaging the honor and the reputation of the Supreme Court itself. As far as this bill is concerned, what we've seen in the last few weeks is unprecedented, and we can just expect anything and everything when the courts open on Monday.
Right, fair enough. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. I know you're short of time. Thank you, Shahza. I'm going to go to Irfan Ghouri Saab. Ji, Irfan Saab, you heard what our legal minds, Umer Gilani Saab is saying, what Usama Khawar is saying, Zulfikar Ali Bader Saab, as the perspective, the opinion of the Parliament, Shahza, and on the enactment of the bill. Overall, as a journalist, you're looking at this from another perspective. When we look at what the Parliament is doing, we look at what the Supreme Court is doing, the kind of back and forth reaction that we are looking at. How do you look at the overall democratic process? How do you think the optics of it as far as this? And then one political party chairing a decision that's come out, that comes out invariably because it seems to suit them. How are you looking at the landscape at this time?
As the situation is unfolding and what we have been seeing for the last many weeks, the standoff between the government and the Supreme Court, and it is getting an uglier turn, that I would say. I mean, even today, Parliament, they have passed the days back, they have passed the openly that the of the court. About the election, Punjab, and about funds that won't be followed. And in the similar way, what we have seen is that courts, they have taken a preemptive measure where legislation that is, of course, it is the domain of the Parliament about stripping the powers, promoter powers of Chief Justice. Though the President has not signed it yet, but the court has sort of, it has taken a preemptive step here. So in such a situation, it's unfortunate that it seems that all the institutions of the state, the judiciary, Parliament, executive, it seems that it's a tussle which is going on at a time when we all know the economic situation of this country, where we are. I don't know. Should we call it that we have practically we have reached a default, or we are at the verge of default? But I would say, but the thing is that in all that, the sufferers is the state of Pakistan and the people of this country. The people who stand in the queues for hours and hours just to get flour. So that's very unfortunate.
Thank you for your valuable input, Irfan Saab. I'm going to go to Zulfikar Ali Bader. Zulfikar Saab, we've also, a little bit away from the constitutional and the legal issue. As far as talks are concerned, your party has, as I understand, constituted a committee to have talks between all political parties. Am I correct? Zulfikar Saab? How far do you expect there to be developments in that quarter also? Because, for a while we also saw judges saying that, perhaps the solution is in talks between political parties without any conditions attached to them, and perhaps, some talks will yield a solution to the kind of constitutional crisis that, we're looking at. Of course, now it seems that we're a little further into that mire, but do you think that those talks will have an effect overall? Are you hopeful?
Our party has always been a believer of dialogue and wanted to reconciliate with other parties and bring all the parties on one table. As you know, Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari's brainchild is PDM, and you see all the political parties who are opponent of our party and our ideology and our manifesto. He has brought all the parties by putting our egos and manifesto aside for the sake of Pakistan and people of Pakistan. So one stakeholder is out of that league, and rest of them are on the table. So what our party leadership have decided that we have to constitute a committee who's going to talk within the national unity government, the parties within the national unity government, and we are going to talk to the rest of the political parties and stakeholders. So bring them on board on the table and make them understand that everybody should be on the table to have a dialogue, because through dialogue we will be able to resolve the issues. And once we resolve the issues, so we have to sacrifice a bit, and we have to gain and some lose something. I mean, these are the things, these are the key things that we have to take a step in order to reconcile between the parties. And our
The
party
give
is
and take,
taking a lead
Zulfikar Sahib,
in
the give
order
and
to
take
resolve.
that invariably will follow, that you are saying will involve this exchange, may end the kind of acrimony that we've seen. We also saw some members of the PTI return to the parliament. Do you think it's possible that, if their members return, if that's legally possible at all now, and there is a presence and there are talks, then we can move ahead, and the political process can continue in a reasonable manner?
Mahrukh, I tell you one thing. In my life, I have learned one thing. Everything is possible once you sit down on the table and you try. You have make up your mind to resolve the issues. I mean, two things you can gain and two things you have to lose. Once you come on the table and you decide that you have to resolve it. And in this given circumstances and given current scenario, the only possible solution is that Mr. Imran Khan has to come on unconditional basis on the table to resolve the issues. So once he will come on the table, no one from his party is so much competent and capable that he can make a decision on behalf of Mr. Imran Khan. So Khan will have to come on the table and decide whatever the resolution is going to be. Because one thing we have to understand, and the PTI and their leadership have to understand, this is not our stake. We have to talk over and above the politics for the sake of Pakistan and people of Pakistan. And Pakistan People's Party believes in it, that we do politics over and above our own ideology, over and above our manifesto. And we sit down with our opponents and we compromise, we sacrifice, and we do a manageable thing, that we bring everyone on board and make a unity government. That's you have seen when this parliament, this National Assembly passed a vote of no confidence through a constitutional and legal manner. It was like,
right, fair enough.
we brought
Zulfikar
all
Sahib,
the
thank you. I
stakeholders
will let me go to Umer Gilani Sahib. Umer Gilani Sahib, do you think it's too far? I mean, we're too far into this now for this to perhaps, recede, the crisis that we are seeing with talks between political parties? Because now, like you said, it's judiciary against judiciary, and it's parliament against judiciary. So it seems to be multifold, the acrimony, the battle, for the lack of a better word at this time.
But my message is still the same: bury the hatchet. That is something. That is our message to the factions within the judiciary, the factions within the parliament, because one of the factions in the parliament is not sitting in the parliament, the PTI. But as a constitutional theorist, I still consider them a part of the parliament. What claim does the PTI have to being, to being heard? It is the fact that they were able to win a majority of seats in the parliament in the last election, and that they hope to achieve a similar success in the next one. The PTI cannot have what it wants without giving the parliament, the institution, its due. And I believe that there is a need for healing the wounds in this country, because if we continue to fight our own little battles, both inside the institutions and between these institutions, sooner or later the costs will be borne by the poor and the weak and the ordinary people of this country. So our message is, heal the wounds. We don't want more of this.
Fair enough. I'm going to go to Usama. Usama, can you hear me? Usama?
Yes, Mahrukh, I can hear you.
Usama, the same question to you. Do you think it's, as far as this battle within the Supreme Court is concerned, when Umer Gilani says bury the hatchet, it has to be, it's not only between the Parliament and the Supreme Court, it's also within the Supreme Court. And that, do you think, is more, a cause for more concern? Because as far as the Supreme Court itself is concerned, the way it's looking, the optics of it, this is the superior, the most, the highest court of the land. It has its own sanctity. It has its own, to see the kind of, I don't know what one can call it, exhibitionism that we've seen, the kind of arguments that we've seen, the way that, the notes have been penned. It is kind of, it's not boding well for the overall, legal process also.
Mahrukh, I think it's very disturbing, as I pointed out. If it was just a battle between individuals, it is incredibly funny sometimes. It sometimes appears to be a WWF match, wrestling match. So if the stake, but the only problem is the stakes are so high. And the stakes, as Umer Gilani pointed out, there are real consequences of these 14 men and 1 woman fighting amongst them on many of them very petty issues. So, but the stakes for the people of Pakistan and for the state of Pakistan are really high. So, and I say this because in this process, one of the Chief Justice and his brothers, who are on his side, they have sort of destroyed the legal propriety, the loss of laws. They have militated against well-established precedents that run in common law jurisdiction that we inherited and that run hundreds of years, go back 100 years ago. So they have broken that trust. So we are talking about an institution where the judges, even if they disagree with each other, they say
don't you think it's too late for themselves, as far as the justices themselves are concerned, for their lords to back down on either side?
I agree, Mahrukh. I think it is at that point where either one of the parties is going to survive. I think there's going to be a complete purge of one of the sections, whoever survives. So right now we have reached a stage where it is a battle for survival for both the sides. What is unfortunate that one of the sides is not actually a side. So I would like to point out amazing, very independent jurists like Sayyid Mansoor Ali Shah, Qazi Faiz Isa, Justice Atar Manila. So Mahrukh, if you remember, after this so-called conspiracy of regime change was touted, it was Justice Atar Manila at Islamabad High Court who was giving relief to Imran Khan, coming under tremendous pressure from supporters of ruling government, that he was giving to relief PTI. Similarly, Justice Mansoor Ali Shah was very credible independent judge. He was Chief Justice in the Lahore High Court. He gave a very, very tough time to Shehbaz Sharif-led government in Punjab. Same goes for Justice Yahya Afridi. He, in fact, in Qazi Faiz Isa...
So regardless of which side they're on, my lords have themselves, have probably damaged themselves more than anybody else in this fight. and it doesn't matter which side they're on at this time. You
Yeah,
agree
I
with that?
agree, but I think I agree, but with a caveat, Maru. So we should be careful of creating false equivalence. So there are two sides, and it appears both sides are at equal fault because they are fighting. One, there's a group of judges who are saying there needs to be a procedural sort of propriety. There's law, there's constitution that has to be followed. So they are not siding per se. It's not like scheming together. All they are saying is that we need to stand with the constitution, with the rules.
Fair
It's on
enough.
the other side. It's
Unfortunately, that's all the time that I have. Thank you so much for being with us today. Umer Gilani Saab, thank you for joining us today. Zulfikar Ali Bader Saab, thank you for being with us. Usama, Khawar, Ghumman, thank you for joining us. Irfan Saab, thank you for being with us. Shahza Fatma Khwaja, thank you for your valuable input. As far as the overall situation at this time is concerned, certainly it doesn't matter which side the Lord Justices are on. The fact is that it seems to be a key cause for concern all around. It does as far as the Parliament is concerned, the legislation we saw today. Of course, we won't know the fate of this legislation, and for a few weeks. We've seen what happened to the last piece of legislation the Parliament legislated upon. Parliamentary supremacy, of course, and the concept of separation of powers seems rather bookish at this time when we look at what's overall happening all around. Of course, one hopes that in the next couple of weeks, perhaps sooner, we will see a certain kind of clarity emerge, a certain kind of maturity emerge that is not perpetuated with any ego battles, any battles of supremacy, but rather a lookout for the overall legal process, constitutional process, and Pakistan's own fight for democracy that we've seen in the past. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.